Welcome, welcome. If you're a domestic violence service provider, so Dove Center, you maybe don't want to be in this training. You are welcome to be here. We're going to talk about what you do when you enter identified data into the system, which is very different than how you enter data. So it's like, remember that we have a training for domestic violence service providers. If you email HMIS@utah.gov, which is on a bunch of our slides, we will point you in that right direction, and we're happy to provide some additional help. But you can't put identified data in the system, and we're going to talk a lot about identified data. So we have people who are super duper familiar with coordinated entry, like you're the CE leads in the community, and then we have people who are not, and you're brand new to coordinated entry. So I'm going to go through this, and if I say something wrong and you're a CE lead and you know better, tell me. Yeah, like seriously, this is a casual thing. I'm standing in a room, but like genuinely, like interrupt me. It's fine. So the main goal for coordinated entry really is to make life simpler for the clients that we're serving, and for us, right? Like that is the overreaching goal. And in that task, we made things harder, which is like the epitome of what government and database systems do. Coordinated entry itself is broken up into several key steps, and hopefully those of you who've done this is massive review. And there's a lot more training about this as well, because I'm going to go fairly quickly through this if you are brand new to it. So it starts with this access step, and this could be at any point in their system. The first time they're identified as a person who's experiencing homelessness, that first service provider that they touch, that's an access point. And that's when you can start working with that client. You've identified this individual. I can't actually see what's on my screen because it's so small. So yeah, like going to emergency help shelter, calling a local helpline. We have Salt Lake County on there, but like 211 or any other like local ones. Going to a homeless services provider or just any other place where they're identified that they're experiencing homelessness. That's an access event. When that access event happens, then we start with these assessments, which is like this second category. You can see like even on this graphic, there are a bunch of different versions of assessment that can happen. And this is just like our initial like touch of like what the best intervention is for this person. So you have somebody coming to you in your emergency shelter. They say, I need shelter tonight. Your assessment be like, maybe like, okay, cool. Do you have family? Do you have kids? Do you have whatever? This is the bed we're going to place you in, right? Or like, this is the availability we have. It could also be like, we need housing. These are the housing options we have. This is the assessment we're going to do to help place you to that particular type of housing. I should probably put my soda there. My lunch soda. I had more than just that for lunch. Prioritization. Since we have fewer resources and we have people who need resources, we have to prioritize the resources we have. In Utah, this is primarily around housing. And so like this is where the VI SPDAT and the SPDAT assessments are being used a lot to help prioritize for housing. But it could be used for any of our services that are meant for people experiencing homelessness, like emergency shelter, homelessness prevention, whatever. And that is just the process that the community has decided, like, these are the things that we think are the most important for this particular thing. So we're going to prioritize folks that have this thing over people who don't. And then when we run out of those resources, hopefully some of those that don't have it also get it. Let's see, what else is that? The referral. So the final part of this is that referral, because even though like that initial access point, like say you're the Department of Workforce Services employment counselor person, you've identified this person experiencing literal homelessness needs help, you are not the emergency shelter provider. You need to submit a referral to who is providing that. And like in OWCAP's example, like, excuse me, an example for OWCAP, like you guys do some homelessness prevention here, sort of, you did. Anyway. But like you're referring out to the community for most of those things, and that's where that referral step happens. These are all things that happen in UHMIS as well. I'm sure you have all seen this. I hope you've seen this. This is the Division of Local Homeless Councils in Utah. Each one of you is probably in a different one. So like keep in mind where you are. If you don't know who your lead for coordinated entry is, this link for balance of state is. Also, Cody is a really good person to ask about who to talk to if you're not that person. Because each community has its own coordinated entry meeting. They may call it something different, like triage or family, like I'm just thinking of Salt Lake County ones, or they may call it coordinated entry or coordinated assessment. Each community has kind of their own version of it, so you've got to talk to them about how they do it. How we're using it in Utah, I kind of mentioned this. Generally, coordinated entry is used to match people to housing. Coordinated entry can be used for a lot more, but really it's very centralized on let's get somebody in these vouchers or like this housing unit that we have. And it's pretty effective. It's relatively effective in that, but that's really where it's focused. I also kind of mentioned this, that it can be used for a lot more than that, and I would love for you guys to do that. I think it would be so awesome, especially as resources are feeling more and more limited. Using coordinated entry to help prioritize access to some of these necessary services can help. The idea is to help save lives, to get in like the fluffy altruistic way of it. So coordinated entry in HMIS, because that's who I am, an HMIS person. How is this tracked? Generic overview of it. Coordinated entry itself has special enrollments. They are all identified as coordinated entry. The entry assessment itself is different than it would be for any other program enrollment. It's a much lighter touch assessment, but it is its own unique project type. When someone is enrolled in that coordinated entry enrollment, they show up on something called the by name list, which hopefully everybody who's looked at coordinated entry once is familiar with. And I'll go through that too. But that by name list is the list that should be used to prioritize folks for the services that you're looking at, probably housing, which is what I said there. When clients are prioritized for those services, we have things called CE events. And those events can be used to identify referrals to those services. So like OWCAP wants to prioritize somebody for a rapid rehousing program. They would enter in a CE event for that to say like this rapid rehousing program, we want this client to go there. And what that does on the back end is there's reporting associated with that so that when we look at it later, we know OWCAP or Ogden-Weber or Weber-Morgan County LHC has made this many referrals in the coordinated entry system during this time period. So the by name list, how it's organized, I don't know if people can hear you because my mic's the only one that is unmuted. It is organized by how you search it. So if you can search it, and we can show this in the system, if you search it without any filters, you'll see everybody enrolled in any coordinated entry project in the state. Usually you can filter it by the coordinated entry enrollments that you have access to. And so most of the time that's how it's sorted. Yeah, and William just added it's how you generate that report, and most of it's pulled from CE and HMIS. And like, as the HMIS person who built that report, please use HMIS. Seriously, there's been so many hours building this report. When a client is housed or disengages in this system, which you guys can define what disengage means, basically you're no longer accessing services in your community, they should be exited from the coordinated entry enrollment because they're no longer in need of those services and don't need to be prioritized anymore. When they come back, if they come back, you can put them on that coordinated entry enrollment. So you can talk about them some more. And then I already kind of mentioned this, there is the reporting associated with this called the coordinated entry APR. And that will show you all of the work. And most of the people on this call, you probably won't ever pull a CE APR, but it does have stuff. It is a HUD report for coordinated entry, and it does tell us a lot of really good information about what's going on with coordinated entry in your community. Okay, coordinated entry assessment workflow. I'm gonna also go through this really quickly because we started so late. A lot of you are familiar with how Client Track works. Any coordinated entry assessment, any enrollment, it starts in the same place on this intake, add new client or enrollment button. When you do that, it takes you through that intake assessment workflow. You check the clients that you're working with. These are two, would be a family, so you would identify like these two people want to be served together, so I'm going to enroll them together in coordinated entry. Important for later on. You could also just have one person there too. Like if you're only going to try to house one person together. You would complete this universal data assessment page as described in our new end user training. If you haven't been through that, probably just the folks online. We have that HMIS at utah.gov. We can show you how to do it. And Zach, you can't see right now, can send it to you. Because we do go through it in detail. There is actually quite a lot you want to know about this before you try to fill it out. But I'm also going to skip it because it's a lot to go through in this meeting. This is the triage assessment. This is unique to coordinated entry. I'm also going to skip past a lot of this as well. It's in the slides. I'll make sure Cody gets a copy of those slides. I mean, I guess you have them because we had to put it on the jump drive, but I'll get you the PDF version. But it's customized for, it could potentially be different for every LHC. Right now, it's all the same. That will likely change in the coming year. And this is something that you guys can be talking about as a balanced state, how you want to prioritize folks, and what are the first questions you want to be asking a person as they're accessing the system. What we have in place now was, if you have been around for a while, was the diversion assessment, developed by Utah Community Action in Sully County many years ago. And it may not, I don't know if it's really super relevant for what we're doing with coordinated entry now. So this is a really good opportunity to customize and make this useful for you. The triage assessment has several data elements. I will go through the required ones here. The location, so the date is just the day you did the assessment. The location is where you did. It's usually just your employer's name. So like Ogden Leaper Community Action Partnership, or that's the only one I'm thinking of because Cody is right there in front of me. So it's just where you're working usually. Sometimes it'll be like a site-based, but most of the time it's just where you work. How you talk to them, most of the time this is in person. Sometimes it's virtual or over the phone, that's fine. Your household type defaults with how you set up the enrollment. So if you enroll 2 people into your family or into your coordinated entry enrollment, it's going to say it's a family with children and adults. Your information date should match your assessment date, and then the enrollment will default to the coordinated entry enrollment you created. You won't be able to change that. The verified project, you do not need to fill out. If you were getting that information from another project who doesn't use HMIS, you could use that to track it. You do not need to fill it out, and that's why there's no red asterisk next to it. Then we talk about current living situation. That's just where they're staying tonight. So are they on the streets? Are they in a shelter? Are they with friends or family or whatever? If you respond to this with a homeless situation, then you're done. If you respond to any other option on the list, you get some conditional logic questions. They're all yes or no questions. It's really just trying to decide, like, this program is designed for people who are literally homeless. Why is this person not literally homeless tonight? Do they need more support? Do they need to be exited? It is what it is. This comments box is usually filled out after the fact. So as you're enrolling somebody into coordinated entry for the first time, you do not really need to put anything in there. You can get back into this triage assessment once they're on the by name list and you're serving them and you're going through this by name process or your coordinated entry meetings process, and you can take notes like been prioritized for this housing, waiting on an ID or whatever. To be honest, like I said, I built this out. It's not my favorite thing of how it's functioning right now, but it's there for you guys to take notes, and it's you just have to edit the triage assessment for the entry. The triage assessment goes on to talk about domestic violence history. This one, these particular questions are really just trying to identify if this person needs to be referred to a domestic violence service provider or in immediate crisis. Are they going to be in harm's way if they stay where they are right now or in like a traditional emergency shelter? If you answer the questions in the super right perfect order, you get this open answer response box that you have to put a response in to get the form to save. Do not put where you're sending them. Don't put the YWCA or Dove or whatever. There's a reason why domestic violence service providers don't enter identified data into the system. While HMIS itself is secure and it follows those rules, it's not secure enough for those victim services providers. We don't want to accidentally identify where a survivor is going because we can't guarantee that the person that they're fleeing from wouldn't get a hold of that. So, or somebody like, we just want to make sure, put a dot in there, put NA, put gibberish in there. I don't care. I can't make it not required. I fought with this field for a really long time. I can't make it required. It is really frustrating. Please don't put where you send them. Okay, everything else on this except for the very last couple of questions on here are not required. So if you are interested in what this says, please come back to the slides. You can read through them. They are actually all relatively intuitive. So I am actually going to skip to this last couple of things. These are the very bottom. Once you get the domestic violence service questions in, you actually really don't need to scroll down and see this. I just kind of want to let you guys know that this is here and that it's saving. So the first thing is this placed on prioritization status. The simple answer is this is a HUD element. It's required for coordinated entry. And all it's saying is that you enrolled them in coordinated entry, which you did 2 pages ago in the system. So we defaulted it to staying placed on prioritization list. If you were going to exit them immediately for whatever reason, you could change that to not placed on prioritization list. But the majority of the people that you're putting in coordinated entry, you're going to want to prioritize them. And then this other one is restrict to MOU/info release. This is just kind of a good reminder. Any data that you're putting into the system is automatically shared. And so we expect you to have what's called an informed consent release form signed by that client before you're enrolling them in any projects. Coordinated entry is especially important because the only way coordinated entry works is if that client information is shared. It is one of the very few projects that if they do not sign that informed consent release form, you cannot enroll them in that project because they are not eligible. You will have to work with your CE leads in your areas to figure out other ways to serve that client, but they can't go into coordinated entry. They can't be on the by name list. And what would happen is if you restricted it to org and you enrolled them in it, you would see that client on the by name list, but your CE lead, who maybe is with another organization, would not. So you wouldn't be able to prioritize them. Okay, the next thing you see in that workflow is called a housing needs assessment. Anybody know what a housing needs assessment is in HMIS? I'm looking at you in the room, but like, you can raise your hand on the thing. It is the VIs for that. Yes, it's the VIs for that, at least for right now. So HUD has this thing where it says, like, they say, like, you need to have a housing needs assessment as a part of your coordinated entry process, but you get to decide what that is. So we have been using the VIs for that. We know that it's flawed. We know there are challenges with the VIs for that. I just realized that wasn't open all the way. We know that we're working on replacing it. It is a ways down the line. So we're still using the VIs for that. This can also be customized by community. So if Balance of State as a whole decides they want to use something else, then we can replace this. This is not a VI SPDAT training. I am not a certified org code SPDAT trainer. So if you need to do that, I would suggest reaching out to your CE leads, or if you are that CE lead and you don't know, email us and we'll figure out training for you. There are several SPDAT trainers in the state of Utah. Getting that training is a whole other story. So after you put in that housing needs assessment, or if you don't put in that housing needs assessment, you will finish your workflow and your client is magically enrolled in coordinated entry. If you go to the by name list in the system, and I probably should jump into the system, let's see, I show you how to get to that by name list on the next slide. You'll now see your client in the by name list. So if you search the by name list, like I said before, you can search just legitimately blank parameters and you'll see everybody on that by name list. You can also search by your client ID. You can search by project name. So this very first, I don't know if you can see that. I don't think you can. This where it says project name and it's an open text box here. And the people on the screen can't see that. But it's not a drop down. If you just search your first couple of letters of your LHC, so like for Bear River, you would search Bear. Then you'll see all of the results of it. I'll answer your question in a second. See all of the results for that COC or that LHC on that result. So you'll see your domestic violence service providers and you'll see your identified data together in one list. So like if you're working with domestic violence service providers, search that way. Using the provider name, type it in. Oh, you had a question.
Does it only search by provider? Or sorry, does it search by both provider and LHC?
Depends on how you enter the search.
Okay.
There isn't a specific like LHC, so it's just the project names. So like the first part of the project name, they're all named the same in the LHC. So like as long as you know that first word in your LHC, you would be able to search for everything. The other thing is this drop-down list, the project name drop-down. It may default to the coordinated entry list, the project that you can enroll into. You may need to remember to deselect that. So when I pull it, because I have access to multiple coordinated entry lists, it doesn't have it just automatically selected for me. I know that when users who only have access to one, they will automatically select that one for them, which can be a little bit frustrating. Here's how you get to it. In the system, so from your home workspace, so most people work in client, which is in that blue bar on the left-hand side, guys. I know you can't see me. There. We're going real high tech here. So most people work in here. Oh, you still can't see that. All right. Most people work here. You click here to click by name list. It's just a list thing. It's got a 1, 2, 3 list number. Quiet, Zach. And then you can click on the by name list. There are actually 3 options. I need to update the screen grab now. There is a quick by name list. There's this one, and there's a by name list report. The quick by name list, if you're not exporting it, use that one. It's not the default one. You will have to click on where it says click by name list. The reason is it just runs way faster for you, and you can use it in the system. The report, if you're going to export any of the data to the by name list, run it as a report, and then you can export it from that report. Yeah, it just runs faster and better. This one is the original by name list, the original flavor by name list. It is essentially that by name list report, so it's got a bunch of extra queries in it and has been really clunky to run, and I'm sure a lot of you have felt that. If you were around to use the old BI SPDAT housing list, you probably felt it, and the pain of trying to get that thing to run, same deal. If you need to get that data on the back end, run it as a report and then export it. Okay, this is how you search a by name list. I think I just went through and very basically showed you things that you can click. I will let you read through this on the slides on your own because that's a lot of words and I don't want to explain it. Also, it's really, really intuitive, right? The search buttons are there for a reason, and there's descriptions there if you need it. I think the biggest thing is that if you want to search by a specific BI SPDAT, or a SPDAT score in there, it's that and above. So if you want to look for people with BI SPDATs of 14 or above, then you would just type 14 and you get 14, 15, 16, whatever. Domestic violence service providers, they don't enter in that BI SPDAT score into the system, so just be aware of that as you're searching this way. You might accidentally filter out your domestic violence service providers if you add one of these parameters like household type or chronic status or whatever, because they're not entering that into the system. This is what a by name list results looks like. To be really honest, this will probably change in the nearish future as well. This is kind of in flux. We are developing best practices with this, and I want to know what you guys think. What do you need as a part of this so that we can make sure that it is functional for you guys? This was kind of my best guess of what I thought that you would need when I built this out 2 years ago at this point. Now you've been using this a while, what do you actually need on this by name list? And William and the Office of Homeless Services is working really hard to make sure that we have that. I've also been working with Salt Lake County to try to figure out exactly what you need, because I know this isn't quite where you need it to be. The trick with this is just knowing that you can filter these search results, you can minimize, because it's a really big search result list. There's more talks about how you can filter things by. You can sort your list. This actually works on any list sort or any list. If you're looking for in the Find Clients page for all your clients, you can sort it ascending or descending or however you want to see it. And then you can see things in different ways. So if you want to look at all your BI SPDATs above 14, but you want to look at people that have the highest BI SPDAT in your community, you could sort that BI SPDAT column from highest to lowest, and you see that highest BI SPDAT. The by name list results, you can export them. This is again from kind of that old school slow one. This is essentially what the by name list report exports. You can get this query, or you can get this Excel export. There's actually quite a bit more data in here. I have opinions about the queries that are used in there, so use them with a grain of salt. And if you're going to use some of the additional data, maybe reach out to us so we can kind of explain exactly what those are doing before you start prioritizing folks on them. But they are there. It is a tool for you to use for now. And then the SPDAT. So a lot of communities are using the SPDAT as their main prioritization tool. That's fine. It isn't actually part of a HUD coordinated entry things, because we have the BI SPDAT currently marked as that housing needs assessment. You can add it on the coordinated entry by name list. You find it there. You find it just right there on that list. You can also find it in the client's workspace. And I don't have that screen grab, but it is there, I swear. Yeah, the thing about that is you just have to do it separately and you have to know what it is. And that also may change. We'll see what happens with the SPDAT in the next year or whatever it is. Okay. Before I move on to CE events, that was our quick and dirty on how to enroll somebody in coordinated entry without actually looking in the system or anything. Do I have any questions online or in the room, or questions, comments? Time is it? Okay. Not online? Are you guys sure? I'm gonna just sit here. You gotta find, you gotta give people time to find their chat box. Legitimately, I lose it. I use all of them apps. It's confusing. Yeah, because CE events are the spice of coordinated entry. That's how this started, and it was like an Emerald joke. It was like, bam. Now it's just spices. They're pretty good. Okay, well, please feel free to chat, chime up. You can just like interrupt me if you want. I won't be mad. Coordinated entry events. So this is where really all of the tracking. So everything that I just talked through, that APR, that report that I talked about earlier, doesn't actually pick up on that coordinated entry report. This is where things start picking up on that coordinated entry report. It's also the most underutilized part of coordinated entry. It's these coordinated entry events. So there are a couple of different kinds of events that you can have in the system. These also get really complicated, which I think is part of the reason why they're not used. And it's the biggest deviation from how we did it before with the BI stats, that housing list. So we have access events or like your triage assessments. So that's like your entry into coordinated entry. That like that former diversion assessment, that's a triage assessment. Your housing needs assessments, your BI stat. Housing problem solving is also known as, I'm actually gonna, before I answer, who knows what housing problem solving is also known as? Does Zach know? I'm going to call you out. Anybody online? Oh, I didn't mean to make this a really hard question. We have kind of reworked how we just discussed diversion. I am really bad. I still like, we've been calling it diversion for 10 years. We're calling it housing problem solving because it can happen at any part of the assessment process. And we have a really well set way of how to track diversion data or housing problem solving data using coordinated entry. So these are actually a very big part of coordinated entry. So there's a lot of this training. You can, at the bottom of the slide, you can even see that it's now the housing problem solving slide because I stole this from that training. Because it's also the most, it's like the most well set example of how we use these types of CE events. We also have referral events. So these are referrals to housing projects, housing navigation support services, emergency shelter, which is a part of housing problem solving, and the results. All of this shows up on that reporting and is what we can say how your community is operating. So adding a CE event is pretty simple. You can either do it from the client's workspace or you can do it from coordinated entry. The hope is that you're doing it during your coordinated entry calls. You have it up in client track to say, hey, example client list, refer them to this rapid rehousing program. Sweet, I'm gonna add that to this while we're talking about it, and I'm gonna jump back to my binary list. It should be able to function that way, so you don't have to download these lists and then come and do some data entry after, like perfect world, this is how it's happening. But it's fairly simple. You just like, you find where it says CE event and then say add new. What was that? Zach's saying that it's not wrong to bring the spreadsheets in and go back and do data. You're not wrong about that either. There's a more efficient way to do it. And it's in the system and it's now functional to the point where you can actually do it in the system, I swear. So we're going to talk about adding a couple of different kinds of events. So this is the housing problem event, housing problem assessment, housing problem solving. Like I said, I pulled this from our housing problem solving slides. This is an access event. There are actually multiple different kinds of access events. Most of them are these housing problem solving conversations. When you open it up, when you click on add new CE event, it's going to fall into this first category under access events. We'll just be under that header access events. For housing problem solving, which I just realized that the spacing on this purple, what's that? Let's create this. Okay. I don't know what's going on with that. Anyway, this housing problem solving piece, it will, that's your diversion, and that's very specific, and they will have housing problem solving or diversion in title. It may actually be different depending on the community you're in. You may have different options there, but it will have those things. Otherwise, you could do other access events like a triage assessment, whatever. Once you select, it's pretty straightforward. When you put it in, you select your, if we're going to do housing problem solving, you'll put it in, you identify that it's a part of this coordinated entry enrollment. We've recently identified that this enrollment, I think it's been fixed. You could potentially stick it to any coordinated entry enrollment this client has ever had, including closed ones. So make sure it's an open coordinated entry enrollment before you save it. And then this question, problem solving, diversion, rapid resolution, intervention or service, were they housed in a safe alternative? You would mark yes or no. And I actually have another couple of slides about this because this is a really important part to keep in mind whenever you're doing one of these housing problem solvings. This is super important because it changes like the effect of this, and it's good to know what a safe alternative is. Can anybody tell me what you would mark if you were putting this client in emergency shelter tonight? And I actually would love if somebody online told me, because y'all are really quiet. Yeah, Zach, you want to call on people? I can only see Renee. If you put somebody in shelter tonight, what do you mark?
What'd you say? Like you're like kind of cutting in and out. It's kind
I'm
of hard.
sorry. I've tried to get this. Okay. Okay. If you are putting somebody into emergency shelter tonight, what do you mark?
What do I mark?
For your housing problem solving, if you did this service, hold on, I try to move my mic so maybe it'll work better. You did this, you marked diversion assessment, and you diverted them, and they stayed in shelter tonight, or your hotel program. Would you mark yes or no to the question, housing problem solving, diversion, rapid resolution, intervention, or service, client housed in a safe alternative? What do you mark?
Do I mark yes?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, stop.
Training, and that's why I want to, because everybody marks yes there. Seriously,
Okay.
Data. You mark no.
This is why I'm here, okay?
No, that's 100% true. Thank you, Renee. I appreciate it. So the reason is a safe alternative is not emergency shelter. They became homeless that night. If you put them in emergency shelter, everybody in the state does it the other way around. That's why I'm making it such a big deal. It is a really key part of our state reporting. So if you receive money from OHS for diversion data, make sure if you are referring them to an emergency shelter project for that night, you mark no. If you are sending them to their friends, their family, and not literally homeless situation that night, you can mark yes. You would also exit them from coordinated entry, which I think we talk about in a bunch of slides from now. The other type of coordinated entry event is this referral event. So I'm doing this in context with Cook Diversion because it's the most set up. There are referrals to all sorts of locations like rapid rehousing projects, permanent supportive housing projects, basically any other type of housing project, and very continuum. In the context of a diversion, you're diverting this person, they are staying in a shelter or hotel or motel program that night. You would enter this into the system. You would mark the enrollment that it is attached to that coordinated entry enrollment. You would mark where it is. So you would mark like the emergency shelter project that you are sending them to, who the provider for that is, and then if you know it, the results. If you don't, that referring provider needs to go in and put that in. I don't expect you guys to know what the result is when you're sending that referral unless you're actually that provider and you're just putting it in to track like, hey, these are how many people ended up in shelter after we talked about these housing problem solving conversations. This is a tricky part too because it's that remember to come back to something that already exists. It isn't super obvious to remember. And in that CE APR that I keep referring to, it doesn't actually show up on the APR unless you put a result in there. So it kind of just doesn't count until you know what happens with that CE event, with that referral event. So it's important to make sure you know what happens and you follow up. But you shouldn't have to know what happens when you put the referral in because then like you're just putting data entry after the fact. Okay, questions about those? No questions. It's perfectly clear. You're going to all do it awesomely because you're amazing people. Okay. Okay, so we have some resources for you for housing problem solving. Like I said, I did steal this from our diversion training. There is actually a diversion training on our HMIS website that you can take, which is a lot of these same slides. If you scan this or click the link, I don't know, Zach, can you get the link somehow? If you, do you know in our Google Drive under the diversion training, like under HMIS training, there's a diversion, there's a folder within that diversion training that's like a handouts. That's the link that I have here. Can you pop that in the chat, pretty please? Thank you. Y'all can scan it too. Because there's a couple of handouts, and in particular, I'll give you guys just one more second to try to get this, and then Zach will get it in the chat too. In particular, there is this flow chart. And if you're doing diversion or housing problem solving at all, I encourage you to print out this flow chart and stick it up on your wall because it can get really confusing really fast. This is also just a really good review of like how complicated these CE events can get and when and where you would use them. So it's in our Google Drive under HMIS training, diversion, and then not that full diversion link. There's another folder in there that has for handouts. It's got the slides and then this handout in it. There's only two. You can give them a link to the whole, like both, like to that folder, just that subfolder. Thank you. So this one is just kind of examples of what you do. So the client was diverted before the inter-emergency shelter. I actually am not going to go through all of these examples, but just as an example, so you would start. I can't show you guys on here, and this is frustrating. Okay, you'll start on the green box, and you would look the green diamond, and you would say, like, is the client enrolled in coordinated entry? You would look that up in the system and find out if they were enrolled. If they aren't, you enroll them. If they are, then you're done, and you go on to the next thing. The next question you're asking, were they housed in a safe alternative tonight? Remembering that that is not emergency shelter. If the answer is yes, you say, was the client in emergency shelter last night? So were they literally homeless? Actually, it was emergency shelter last night. If the answer is yes, you do this housing problem solving event saying, or you add the CE event housing problem solving. You say, yes, they were housed in a safe alternative. They did not enter into literal homelessness. And then you exit them from coordinated entry because they are no longer in need. They are no longer literally homeless in your community. You diverted this episode. You ended this episode of homelessness. They come back, enroll them again. It's okay. If they were in emergency shelter last night, if they were not in emergency shelter last night, then you would do this diversion assessment. That's the actual enrollment or the actual services it's called. And then you would say, yes, you still diverted them. You still ended that episode of homelessness before it started. You're going to exit that coordinated entry enrollment. There are several other examples in these slides that I'm not going to go through. Just kind of talking through this process. If you do this diversion training, it does talk through it very thoroughly. But I wanted to just give you examples of where these things happen. You'll notice that most of the things that we're putting in is the CE access event. And it just depends on what happens on if it's a housing problem solving event or a diversion event. And then if you answer yes or no to that question, if they were housed in a safe alternative. Okay, that was a lot about CE events. It's hard to give you like this is how you use CE events when we don't have a specific thing in the community. And if we have time after this, I actually would really love to talk about some events that we can add to the system. And we can talk through how you can use those CE events for your coordinated entry for like housing projects and not just diversion. Because I think that if we can commit to doing that, we can actually give you some more tangible ways of like, this is the, like, we're going to refer them to this project and this is how we're tracking it in coordinated entry in the system. And we're just going to try. So if we have time, I'd love to talk to you guys about that. Okay. In addition to everything else I've talked to you about coordinated entry, there is another part of tracking that you have to do with coordinated entry on top of CE events, on top of the housing needs assessment, on top of just the enrollment. You do have to add a current living situation anytime you interact with the client. So you can see on this flow chart here, I just have it circled, like when you're talking about housing problem solving, there are several points where you would add a current living situation. Anytime you do an entry or an exit assessment for you for coordinated entry, it's going to do it for you automatically. It's just a part of the workflow. If you are doing anything outside of an entry and exit, outside of that day, so you're not just enrolling them and then doing other stuff for that client that day, you're adding stuff to an existing enrollment, you need to remember to go back in and add a current living situation. Where are they sleeping tonight as well? Hard to remember because it is also not super intuitive. It's the same trouble that people who operate street outreach projects also need to remember to put in a current living situation every single time you serve a client. It gets missed a lot because it's not just like this 1-2 done thing like a workflow will do. You have to remember to do it. And it's the same thing with coordinated entry. Outside of the workflow, There is a place to find it. It's just in the menu for the client. It's under case management, current living situation, add new. Kind of just, this is a hub required data element. It helps you find the client later. So if a person is living in unsheltered, like street homelessness, you can note that like, hey, they're under the 4th Street bridge, or hey, they're over here, or they're at this shelter tonight. So that you can find them again and follow up with them. Really quickly, I will go through this. Generally, all enrollments in the system, when they're open, do eventually need to be closed. Despite common misconception, enrollments do need to be exited. Same deal with CE. I mentioned it before, it's when somebody disengages or they're housed. So they're no longer experiencing literal homelessness in the community that you're aware of. Each community can kind of decide what disengage means. I think one community has it set at like 65 days of no contact. Another one is 90 days of no contact. You guys can decide as a balanced state how you want to do it, or you can leave it to each LHC. It might be good to have it consistent to the BOS. When you exit a client, it's exactly the same exit assessment workflow that you use for everything else. It's just easier. You can do it from the by name list, or you can do it from the client's workspace. So like if you're in that meeting, coordinated entry meeting, and you go, oh, John Doe, we're not working with them anymore. We haven't seen them. Exit them. Doesn't matter who did the enrollment. I know that was a problem. As long as you use that little life preserver, that exit assessment life preserver, you'll be able to exit them at their last known assessment date or service date. And it could be that day, such as it is. Let's see. If you know the exit destination, please put it what it is. If they exit, they have a move-in date, put it the exit. This, if you know it, they're enrolling into your housing project, you're moving them in, you're putting a move-in date, they're still enrolled in coordinated entry, exit them from coordinated entry to where you're moving them on that day so that we can track it. You would think the system would be smart enough to figure that out. It's really not. So you gotta help it out a little bit. It's smart in some ways, but not in that way. And in that flow chart, just referring back to that, there's a couple of examples of where you would potentially exit it. It's when they're no longer engaged in the system. Okay. We have some role play scenarios, which I actually think are kind of really fun. I don't know about time. I think we'll come back to these. This is again for that diversion conversation. It's messy. Like there's a lot of things in play when it, or like role play. There's a lot of factors in play when you do coordinated entry diversion housing problem solving. So I have these little role play scenarios. I'm gonna go through these really quick so you don't know what the answers are. If we have time, maybe I'll come back. Yeah, but really quick. Yeah, there's so many. I did it with these like pop-up things too, so that like I could reveal the answers. Okay, any questions about CE events or exits or anything else I've talked to you up so far before I jump into like the 2 slides about the provider workspace?
What was the life preserver thing that you were mentioning?
Yeah, so the life preserver is just the icon that you use when you exit a coordinated entry enrollment, and it means that anybody can exit it. Normally, like with any other enrollment in the database, if somebody else were to put it in, another agency, you would not be able to exit their enrollment with probably really good reason. Like you don't want to go exit somebody's permanent supportive housing enrollment. At least they don't want you to exit it for them. The coordinated entry enrollment, anybody can exit it, so that if they were enrolled by one agency and they have long since stopped working with that agency and now they're working with the housing agency, that housing agency can then exit them as them. 3 dots, coordinated entry, the life preserver, instead of the other one. Yep. Perfect. You got it. Yeah. Good question. Okay. The provider workspace. So this is really just like a super quick overview of what this provider workspace is. Really, the provider workspace is super entwined. It's entwined with how those CE events work, especially those referral events. You have to have a provider who is providing those referral events for you to be able to save them so that you can refer people. We, as a part of the HMIS lead monitoring that we've been doing over the last couple of years, have been requiring agencies to add CE events to their provider workspace. Probably too much confusion to most agencies because they don't know what's happening with this. The reason for that is if you are an agency and you're providing rapid rehousing projects, then in that community, you should be able to, on coordinated entry, put a referral in the system and identify, I'm going to refer them to that agency. In my coordinated entry meeting, this agency is the one that's doing rapid rehousing, so we're going to identify that. In the system, because we don't have providers identified for every single potential coordinated entry service, We do have like this generic test coordinated entry provider that you should be able to save them all on. So if you just want to like track that, yes, this person is being referred to this thing, but that provider setup piece isn't there yet, you can still save it, which is kind of a key part of it. But agencies themselves, and this is actually like the first time we've really ever been able to do this, can actually set up and adjust their providers, their services that they are accepting, their coordinated entry things that they're accepting referrals for. I think I have something just like, why is this super helpful? I think of this as like your yellow pages for agencies in the system. I know there are other apps going around out there, and some of them are really shiny and more developed. This is in HMIS. That's always my like retort to some of those things about like referrals and things. This is in HMIS. It works with your HUD reporting, and you can do it alongside the things that you have to do for reporting. You don't have to jump into another system. But you as an agency, your leadership as your agency, you can actually set this up so that it is a good representation of what you are doing. So that as people from around the state are looking for services in your area, they can find you and they know that like, hey, Renee at SULAG has this service and I have somebody that's in Price that needs it. Or like I have somebody that wants to live in St. George. This provider provides that and they can look it up. In the provider's workspace, there's a search function. And on that, when you look at it, there's phone numbers, there's addresses, there's contact folks. You can see the services that they provide. And then when you get this security officer training, which, looking ahead, there is an additional menu that you can unlock if you do a security officer training. Also email HMIS@utah.gov if you would like to do that security officer training. That's what you can do to adjust those settings for you. So as it changes, you don't need to email the HMIS lead agency to say, hey, this person was fired, LOL, can you take them off our providers list? Or like, we ran out of our money for that homelessness prevention project, can you remove it? Like you can adjust it as that funding changes because you're gonna know your services better. Okay, any questions about that? I went through that really fast. It was like 2 slides. It was like a huge like bullet point of what we talked about today, and it was 2 slides. Okay. I've mentioned this APR report a few times. This is presented in context with housing problem solving. This is where you would find that CE APR can be very useful for you. You can also use the search button. I know people online can't see it, but like the search button standing here right next to Skippy. You can search CE APR and you'd find it too, or you can find it in the menu. That Skippy is the logo, the client track logo. Oh, coordinated entry annual performance report. Thank you. It's a HUD term for a fancy report for coordinated entry. Like there it is. What we look at as in like the Office of Homeless Services for housing problem solving is these 2 items in question 10. And they are directly related to the CE event and CE access events that I talked about. So there's this housing problem solving, diversion, rapid resolution, intervention of service. And any CE event that's in the system with either housing problem solving or diversion will fall into this category. And then we also look at referrals to emergency shelter bed openings. That doesn't mean you can see like there's so many other options here that you as a community could be doing referrals to, like your rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, crisis needs, housing needs assessments, case management, street outreach. Like there's so many things that coordinated entry does that you can do referrals for and track. Yes, William.
Or do you know any examples of programs that use the referral to emergency shelter bed opening, like UCA or anything like that?
Yeah, so so William asked if we know of anybody that's using that referral to emergency shelter bed opening. Yes, because it is a part of the housing needs assessment, the housing problem solving process, and it's a part of that training. So yeah, Utah Community Action, any provider that's funded through the Office of Homeless Services that are referring to emergency shelter beds are likely using that particular CE referral event to identify how many people are referred to and the success rate of those. May not be super accurate, but that's what they're doing.
Someone goes into the shelter, but then they don't have space. They do a different assessment with UCA or someone.
Yeah.
They still do that referral emergency shelter bed opening.
And then they can say, one of the options is rejected by provider, and it doesn't really say why it's rejected, but that is a reason, is they have no room. whatever it is, yeah, or like they don't meet the eligibility criteria or whatever it is. If it's a youth shelter and they're 52, they can't use it. Zach's got another question.
If I was random employee at another agency reviewing referrals and something better, who on the other side sees that referral?
Great question.
Because is it going to everyone, like everyone in that agency can see it, or is it specific to the security officer?
Yeah, so Zach asked who on the other side can see that referral. If you put it in from another agency, I'm actually going to show you that in a couple of slides. I think I've got it. There is a report in the system that shows incoming referrals. It is something that we would love to have like an automatic notification. I ask that every time I talk about this. It is not existent in the system right now, but there is a place that you can look, bookmark it, which there's a favorites menu. You can't see on that, the star. I'll show you how to do that if you email me. But you can bookmark it and check it so you can see who's getting these incoming referrals. Most of them that are put in right now, these referrals, they're put in by the service provider. So like SwitchPoint is a good example of that. They put this in. They are also the service provider in the community. But this is just an example of all those things that we don't highlight that you could use as a part of coordinated entry in that process. And you could track how many of these people that are referring to rapid rehousing are successfully getting accepted to that program. The reporting, we talk a little bit more about how this calculates for housing problem solving here. I'm actually going to skip past these. If you're really interested in it, look at the slides. And the last thing here, I don't actually have a screen grab about it, but this incoming referrals box that I have in that orange box, you go to that, you click on it, and it tells you who's going. You do have to be logged in under that provider or that agency that got the referral. So if it was sent to SwitchPoint, you have to be logged in as a SwitchPoint user to see that referral. But otherwise, it just is there, and it just shows up chronologically, the newest on top. That's all I have for this slide deck. I managed, even with our super late start, to get through this in an hour, which I'm super excited about. Because I really just wanted to spend more time answering questions. I can get into the database. Like, this was our overview of it, but we have other things that we can talk about. And I really do want to talk about, like, what are you guys doing in your communities? What housing projects do you have in your community? Would anybody be willing to try out doing CE events or referral events for like a month and see what it's like and see how it's not that bad? I promise, I swear. And if it is, I will fix it. Because I actually just really want to know how we can make it more useful for you too. That's all I got though. So questions, comments, concerns. Is there any way to make it cooler in here? It is like 100 degrees in here. It is really hot in here. I am sweating bullets. That's my question. Can we make it cooler? Well, the chat, I'm just going to sit here. I finished my sleep. I'm gonna try it some more.
If you crush it, it'll be so depressing.
I don't know if people on the line heard that. William said if I crush it, it'll be so depressing.
So they don't cringe too. They don't deserve that.
They do. They got it. They heard. They cringe. What about you guys? Any? Whoa.
I'm with you in that I guess everyone's got an understanding of perfect data, right? That's my understanding.
Is that you got to understand?
Everyone apparently understands.
Yeah, it must. You're all gonna.
Perfectly entered data.
Everybody understands it perfectly, and now it's all going to be absolutely perfect data.
Maybe ask people talk about kind of walk us through what referral looks like right now.
Yeah.
From one place to another. What are you doing? Are you doing a form and sending it? Are you calling or emailing someone, checking for space?
William, you should come stand over here and tell them. Come here. You have a great idea. I don't want to re-say it.
I would like to see that.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome idea. Well, then go the other way.
Hi. One thing that I think might be useful is if we talked about what you're doing right now for referrals. If you're doing it through email, doing a form and sending it to your local housing authority, something like that, or even to shelter. So people can chime in and kind of talk about what they're doing right now, and then how that's going, the good and the bad. I can give a million examples myself, but I like to kind of hear from you guys to see where it's at right now, and then compare that to what it could look like with coordinated entry referrals.
Yeah. It's a great question. I'm gonna have to add this to this training. It's a great question.
Cody.
Yeah, Cody.
I mean, our referral system.
Come here, and if you're in the room, you're gonna have to start coming standing in front of the mic. He's been on camera already. Yeah.
All right, I would say right now, OWCAP's current referral system is through email and face-to-face, usually a warm handoff. Lately, we've been approached by, we're signed up for Unite Us, which is like a competing.
Oh, I know.
I know you meant, you
I'm
probably
aware
were
of
thinking, yep. So we are signed up for that. And so I'm curious to know, like, I want to use HMIS, but there are ones like Unite Us, but I haven't had a success using referrals for either of them. It's hard to get both parties engaged at the same time, wanting to participate.
That's a good point, yeah.
That is a really good point. Who are you doing a lot of referrals to? Is there one or two projects that you are referring to a lot?
Like Center of Excellence,
Okay.
Prosperity Center for
What are you
Excellence.
referring to them for? I'm just out of curiosity.
Well, see, and this is for case management with their resource integration coaches.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
I'm actually I'm just going to back this up a few slides to this one. Okay.
yes.
So case
To the
management is probably that housing navigation. I think there's actually a case management one on there too.
Referrals, post-placement follow-up.
Yeah, post-placement follow-up. Yeah, housing, I guess it just depends on where you're doing it. If you're looking for housing, if you're supporting that, or if it's after you've exited them from a program, referrals for that. So I'm cutting you off. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Well, just know the interesting thing with us is that right now, we currently don't have any programs that require HMIS to participate.
Yeah.
So in our referrals, what?
They are. Yeah, they are.
It's not using that part.
They're coordinated entry HMIS providers. So
Sure.
they see, OWCAP sees the benefit of it so much that they just use it for coordinated entry.
I love data. I love data. But yeah, a lot of it has also been to Ogden PD, the street outreach.
Okay.
Anna and Nancy David. So where'd
So
that
there's
be
street outreach right
referred?
there. Refer to
Street
street
outreach
outreach.
project.
Yeah, it's that in between the two highlighted ones.
Totally.
So what we could do, and maybe Zach could do this, or I can jump in.
Am I done?
Sure.
Sorry, I don't know where this is going.
So what we can do for OWCAP here in Weber is we can create two services or two CE events, referral events. One is referral to COE for case management, and then we can referral to OPD for street outreach, right? We can set that up so that you can see that in coordinated entry. We can set up the providers on the back end so that like you'd be able to see it. And like COE could go in and see it. You could set all that up, and that's what you see as the agency, or as like the community. You're seeing that, and you can select those things. When you pull the report, they would fall under this particular like CE assessment thing on the CE APR. So you would know that like on the back end, these are the same thing, and it becomes functional for you.
So does
Like we
that,
could do that for you today.
the referring provider, do they need to be part of HMIS?
They do. Both the ones you just mentioned are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it just takes in the buy-in. As I look at you, it takes some buy-in. I know that for both of those providers there.
Is there an option if they aren't?
Yeah, we'll bug them. We can, if
Give
they
them
aren't, we can set up the provider underneath, like you as an agency. If you would just like to track it, we could say, you know, it's just like a separate provider. So like it would be a dominant provider basically, but that way you can say like, referring to this one, and then when you pull the report, it's still there, and then you're doing the data entry. We actually do that outside. We do it a little bit in MOAP to kind of negate, like they have a very small setup, very few users. So it's like, it's really just like 1 or 2 people doing all the work in HMIS and MOAP. Yeah. It is what it is, right? It's rural Utah. Sometimes that's what we got. William had another question. If you're going to ask, you have to come over here.
I didn't want to crowd the space.
Crowded.
Yeah, I don't want to crowd the mic.
These two are not going to ask questions last, so we'll make you be on the camera.
Or maybe just use a laptop if you all sit around it.
Really?
Yeah. Another one. So I think another issue is that it's really desynchronized. Where if I were to send in a referral and if I'm meeting with my client today, I'm not going to maybe hear back from them for a while. And granted, that happens with email, but I don't know when they're going to look at it. Whereas with an email, I can assume, they have a process for seeing that communication and that referral. So is there notifications that or something like that someone gets or other information of it's kind of hard to have a back and forth conversation in an email rather than denied puts in comment section. Seems like people will want to supersede this by going back to the old ways, play devil's advocate. So how can that be solved?
Probably gonna have to build some customization. I should probably talk to the camera so that you guys can hear me too. To get like a notification that comes out of it, we probably have to build some customization in the CE events. That's why we have.
There's a little bell, there's a little chime in HMIS.
Well, there's a notification bell.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, you can do that
Programming
kind of
stuff.
sort of. That's why we have this incoming referrals list in general. Because with coordinated entry events, the form that it's saved on is a very complicated form. When you see it, when you're saving these events in the system, it doesn't feel as complicated as it is. When you open it up on the back end, because there is a lot of conditional logic associated with it, it's very, very complicated. It is also the key thing that's tied to that CE APR, that report, that is a HUD report. And it is really new, even by HUD standards, by database standards. We've had it for a couple of years now. It is still brand new, baby new. And so they're still making adjustments, like the developers, HUD, are still making adjustments to the logic and programming of the CE events and the CE APR. So if I make a customization to force it to give you an email notification, which we could potentially do, if they make an update, which I'm fully expecting them to do in October of this year, to the CE event page, we will now be out of compliance for HUD. And since we do have a COC in Utah that has to have that compliance as a thing, we don't want to be out of compliance, right? Like, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, it's a catch-22, where if we do it right this second, we will be out of, so it's a challenge that I am aware of. And as soon as we're confident that it is set and we know that HUD is good, with what their programming is, it is something that we can build into the system. It doesn't exist right this exact moment. That is why. That's why we have this incoming referrals report. The hope is that you are using the CE events or you're using it during coordinated entry. You're looking at that by name list and say, oh yeah, we referred this person. This is what you're looking at. You're using that CE APR. There are a few other tools that you can use. You're not getting that out of the email, and you really probably should have one. It is another, I can make a suggestion to the developers of client track. It's not going to be the highest or anything.
That's fine,
But
yeah. And I think that getting, kind of like how you were saying earlier, that if someone else isn't, checking them, there's zero use in sending it to them. So maybe do something where, only having people in there who are checking them. So we're not sending empty referrals into the nether or something like that, but that's a separate.
Yeah, well, and that's the idea of having like the 1 or 2 that OWCAP is sending out regularly, and having that partnership between OWCAP and COE. You're going to put it in, COE is going to check it. Like when you log in once a day or once a week or whenever, or right before the CE meetings or whatever it is, you take a moment and you look at that incoming referrals and you say, oh, John Doe, X, Y, and Z person has been referred to me. Let's follow up on that. So it does take that extra little step. It's like asking somebody to do this CE or the current living situation. It does take that extra step. it is hard to remember. Like, that's a real thing. And it is one that I would love to correct faster than I'm able to.
Would there be a way to, because I know people are pulling their by name lists through this, ideally, would there be a way to incorporate seeing referrals in some weird, tricky way through things people are already doing?
Yeah, let me see if I can
This is a
get
weird
it to
scripted thing,
share.
I promise you.
So it is in oh, wait, I thought I was sharing on this one.
That's good. Keep it up.
Oh, seriously? You're really good. Okay, well, thanks. I want to show you what screen we're looking at. Well, and if I'm doing the wrong computer, I'm gonna look at this right here. I did not realize I was looking at, you guys were looking at Zach's whole time. Thanks, Zach. Here.
That's Cody's.
Oh yeah, that I know. I thought you were sharing, I don't know what's going on anyways.
Yeah.
Oh, I moved it so I could just switch to the slide that I was looking for. As I was looking for the by name list, I was looking for one of these by name list results just so that I could give you guys an example. There, okay. So in the by name list, that's a terrible one. I'm close though. Can you all see it like this?
Christine, can you switch to bigger?
I don't want to.
I'm cool.
I know, I can't.
I think we can
Oh,
see it, right? I can see it on that.
all right. Y'all in the room are just gonna have to stand closer. I'm gonna tell you, if you can see it on Zach's.
Yeah.
I just want to use it as an example. When you get into the system, you'd be able to see it more. So one of the columns on the by name list for you guys, it is last CE event. It's one that's completely blank on this because there's no CE events in the training database for this one. That shows you the last one that was saved. This is something, like I said, the by name list can definitely be in Flex. We can definitely make edits and changes. I'm already planning on making these changes. We could say what it is. It's really just a problem of space on the by name list because it's a very tight search form. But what that will show is the date of the last CE event. So you can see that like there was something that happened with this client last week or whatever it was. You have to do a little digging to see it elsewhere, but you would be able to see it on the by name list a little bit.
Sorted by, okay, so I pulled my binding list this week. I did get a referral within the last 7 days, so they'll probably go look at it.
Yeah.
Try to find ways to make it easy to catch without the full documentation.
Yeah. I believe if you export it, it will show you what that last CE event is, but it's been a minute since I've looked at that particular
I
element.
think could be something trying to problem solve.
Yeah. For sure. This is, that is a really easy thing to add to the by name list. It's just, it really is spacing. Because it's like, what do we drop instead? That's the question, is what do we take off so that you can see what the CE event was? Maybe the client name. I have thought about removing the client name more than once.
Is there a forum for them and comments? I guess.
Yeah, there is.
Want like changes for the updates? Is
Yeah.
that like MSN you talked
Yeah,
about?
you can, there's actually a couple places you can do it. In the system, there is that like help button. You can submit a suggestion. I love them. Please send them to me. Nobody does. I do them.
I'm probably gonna.
I do them. Wait, legitimately, if somebody says this is terrible and I'm able to make the change, I'll make it. And if I can't, then I'll send it up to the developer. So just if you need help, there's a little like question mark in the bottom left-hand corner. Click on that on the page. You have your suggestion, take a screen grab, send it to us. You can also submit it on our HMIS website. Cody, I'm going to use your Google. Sorry. Hopefully that's okay. It didn't come up immediately when I typed it in. I'm very disappointed. How dare you? It's not just bookmarked. I'm offended. Okay, I'm trying to remember where I even set this because I can't remember. Maybe it's not in there. Sorry, I know I'm not sharing it. This is useless for me to just talk to myself about what I'm looking at on the screen. never mind. I thought I had something on our website that was like a give us feedback with like Google form. I do not. HMIS at utah.gov. We love it. I love it. I listen to it and I really do try to make the changes that are requested because I think that you guys know better than I do. I know that you guys know better than I do on what you need. I said it when I first started, the by name list is my best guess on what you need, but that's by no means what you actually need to do your jobs.
Try to get people to give their input because I know there's a lot of ideas and I don't think they're getting sent
Right.
to y'all. But
So what?
everyone has their opinions about HMIS.
Oh, I know they do. I do too.
We can capture that for y'all.
So what Cody said is that he wants the ideas to be sent. I love that idea. As the CE chair for the balance of state, what I've asked the Salt Lake County CE chair to do is to put those all together for me and like draw it out on how you want it to look. Like if you have a triage assessment form that has those perfect questions that you want to talk through, like literally get a piece of paper and draw it out for me. And like on your by name list, draw it out how you want it to be. I do not grade for like penmanship or artistic ability, but having it visualized can help me build it out and help me build it out much easier. I have something similar to that. We're working on with that with Salt Lake County as well. Yeah, flow chart. No, like how you want it to look in the system. Draw it. Yeah. Right. But like you guys can develop that together as a part of like the CE BOS conversations that you're having. Like just start drawing on like a whiteboard app or something. Like this is what we want it to do, and these are the questions we want it to ask. Yeah, you can use your fancy TV that I can't connect to draw. But like do that, have everybody do it. I know you guys have really good ideas and you're probably right. Because I don't have telepathy, I don't know what those ideas are. Putting it all together, it helps me not have to build it 17 times. So getting it to that point, like this is what we want as a balance of state or as the state coming together with all 3 COCs in the state of Utah, we can put together something that's really good.
And just getting data points.
Right.
Getting the suggestions with data.
Yes. Tell me what you need. And that's, these are conversations that need to happen, right? This is why we default to the diversion assessment when we built this out, because these were conversations that needed to happen that didn't get to happen before we had to start using coordinated entry in this way. And I actually think that it's a huge reason why it's underutilized, because it doesn't include everything that you guys need. The referral notification is definitely a suggestion that I've heard many times. And as soon as I'm able to do it, we'll do it. Okay, this has been a really good conversation. Is there any other questions, thoughts, concerns, death threats? I hope not, but maybe I want to know so I can avoid you. William, you're walking home. You shook your fist at me. Oh, what was that? Somebody is walking. But is there anything else that we want to talk through? Legitimately, would anybody on this call be willing to pilot? We're going to do the referral and we're going to pick it up. I'm going to see how this works. We can use an example for how these events can work and how you can do it all in HMIS. You can do it effectively if you're using it in HMIS at that time. Yeah.
Interested in how to do that.
If you're not able to make that call right now, please reach out to us. I want to make sure this is functional too, so there would be a lot of hand holding from us. That William is here as well, and we really want to make sure this is effective and has what you need, which means like we may need to come in and like come to those meetings with you, and I know William's going to a lot of those too, so that we can make it workable for you and figure out those bugs. Can't do that unless somebody's willing to try it out. And it can be just one program. It doesn't have to be everything. You can just start with one. And it can be our example, and we can say you're the coolest people ever, or something. I'll give you a shout out in the HMIS newsletter. Ooh.
That's prestigious.
That is pretty prestigious. It's the best I can offer.
That's pretty dicey.
I did. There is a secret message in HMIS that if you find it, I may or may not buy you a cup of coffee. It really is. It's on a page most people see pretty regularly. It wasn't a newsletter. See? I'm glad you're honest about it. Read your newsletter. Yeah. I will. May or may not be funded by me. I can't make promises because yeah, I'll make William make you some French press coffee. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you online.